Hi, Iggy.
I
How are you?
doing good, thanks.
Okay, great. What is the initial inspiration behind your composition pieces?
Yeah. I've kind of made a habit of writing, um, and I keep coming back to it, not only because it's like such a wonderful form of self-expression, but also because of how rewarding it is to share my work with others and to like see it come to life. It's how sometimes I process like my inner thoughts or ideas or feelings, um, or especially how I like activate my imagination. And that's something I really deeply value. Um, I feel like composing can sometimes feel like going down a rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, it starts with like small ideas like motifs or textures or gestures, and then it kind of builds from there. And it's kind of like seeing like a little glint or glimmer and
Yeah.
following it down the hole. Um, but instead of there being some sort of like dark pit at the end of the hole, there's actually like an opening on the other side, and that's the part where I get to like share my findings with others to enjoy. So yeah.
Okay, great. Um, is there a piece you would like to share? The key musical ideas or themes you explored?
Yeah, something I'm really excited about. I just wrote a piece called Cabinet of Spices, which is like a theme and microtonal variations for string quartet. And it was partially an experiment. Like I wrote it to answer questions I have about the performance of microtonality. Like, is there a limit to how complex a tuning system can get before it becomes like impractical for like an ensemble to like consistently reproduce?
Mhm.
And are the sonorities of those systems even like worth the effort? um so yeah, and the Dolphins Quartet just premiered it last night actually, so
Oh,
I
great.
got to hear it like realized, and um I definitely learned a lot from it, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Um, how do you approach creating compositions that resonate across diverse global audiences while staying true to your artistic identity?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a big part of my like artistic goal is to stay at some level of accessibility.
Yeah.
Like I love experimenting with like interesting textures and harmonies, but at the end of the day, I want to write music that everyone can enjoy, regardless of if they're like initiated or not in like modern or contemporary music.
Okay.
Um, and in my music, I feel like that often manifests as maybe like tonal harmony or groove or melody, and that all kind of gets like refracted through contemporary timbres and texture. So yeah.
Okay. Um, are there any new directions or unexplored areas within music composition that you're excited to delve into? Your future projects, anything you're excited to work towards?
Definitely. I mean, I feel like I maybe hinted at this earlier, but I'm like currently really interested in microtonality and all of like the seemingly infinite possibilities that the world offers. And I'm excited to like explore like a bridge between the more like mathy and theoretical stuff behind microtonality,
Mm-hmm.
and its like realization in performance in contemporary classical music. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Um, are there any emerging trends or movements that you believe will impact the contemporary genre positively?
I think that like access to contemporary music is growing, like thanks in part to like the internet and organizations who are actively sharing about it on social media platforms. Um, but more and more like music groups of all kinds are embracing contemporary classical music and programming like new and interesting works,
Yeah.
which I think is good, and I think this niche is certainly more visible now than it
Okay.
has been before.
Yeah. Um, so we were talking, I think you mentioned accessibility, but how do you think contemporary classical music can be made more accessible to a wider audience? Any specific strategies that would help it?
That's tough because it's like what makes contemporary classical music contemporary is that it's like based on novel ideas, and like some of them or a lot of those ideas might not always appeal to audiences who don't like closely follow the genre.
Yeah.
um I think to be able to appreciate contemporary classical music, you kind of have to have like a decent knowledge of classical music, or like the canon and the history behind it,
Mhm.
and also have like this open attitude towards like new experiences, um, which is kind of specific, and I don't know how many people that would like apply to. But like, I guess regardless, there are still like a few approaches that you could take, like people, or I guess you could try like mixing popular genres with classical music. Like the LA Phil was at Coachella recently, which is really cool. And Loewe performs with orchestras a lot. So I
Yeah.
think that classical music in that sense is becoming more visible. Um, but also when it comes to like hearing a piece of music, like a piece of contemporary classical music in the concert hall, um, I think that it would be really helpful to speak beforehand, because like there's program notes, but people don't
Yeah.
always read them.
Hmm.
And I feel like, let's say, for example, you're at the orchestra and there's this like gesture that's supposed to like represent, let's say, bird calls, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like your experience of listening to that work when you know it's a bird call versus when you don't, is going to be very different. And I think like supporting the new works with some context would help a listener who's listening to the piece for the first time to kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And actually, I've been to a few concerts at the Minnesota Orchestra recently,
Hmm.
and they're doing a really good job with this. They
Yeah.
kind of they speak beforehand, and they introduce the work, and kind of what elements of the music mean what.
Do you think
So
it engages the audience more?
definitely. I mean, because it also it like we rarely hear like our the musicians like speak,
Yeah.
so it's like it's cool to hear like the conductors like tell us about the program, and kind of what went into making the music. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. On AI, what is your vision for the future of composition with AI tech? Any kind of technology. Any pros or cons?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like music um took the path it did in like the 21st or the 20th century because of technology. And I think AI will certainly be helpful in terms of like music production, or like giving us like the tools to shape our artistic ideas. Um, though on the other hand, I think like generative AI and like the development of generative AI is like almost anti-art in a way. Like I can understand the desire for its development, as kind of like a proof of concept for AI, but I
Yeah.
think that it's like ultimately dangerous for art and artists, because there are like incentives in capitalist structure to like automate work. So if it's like more profitable to automate a process, then it will happen.
Mhm.
And we kind of see that happening already, like in advertising, and it's taking away jobs from artists. Um, and it's kind of a shame that there's a push to automate creativity, because that's something that's like so uniquely human.
Yeah.
And it's also it's that creativity isn't really creativity. It's like a false creativity. Like generative AI isn't creating anything novel, or at least for now.
Yeah.
But so I think it's important, like now more than ever, to value art and human creativity.
Okay. So like would you think like, sometimes there's a creativity part, but like maybe sometimes for not automating like music
Mm-hmm.
itself, but like brainstorming or giving advice on what you already have. Do you think that's a good thing or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, like if it can help shape our artistic ideas, that's good. And that, like you mentioned, that could mean, um, you know, helping us to like clarify our ideas or to help to put things into context, like, um, yeah, but by like giving us feedback, I could imagine it would be like a teacher, but then in that situation, you're putting like teachers out of jobs,
Okay.
so it's like, I don't know, but I think there are it carefully, I think it could be good, in terms of like the tools it'll help us or it'll give us to help us achieve our artistic visions.
Okay. Um, so a lot of music students do not know how to start and how to understand modern classical contemporary music.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any tips for them? I think we also talked about the accessibility of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it is, ingrained in us of what it should sound like, what classical music should sound like.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different. So do you know, like, how did you start? Like, how were you inspired and like what helped you?
Yeah, I mean, kind of just like you have to like practice an instrument, modern music can in a sense take practice as well. Um, because a lot of it's like an acquired taste. And it can sometimes take like many listenings,
Hmm.
and your brain like needs those listenings to like better grasp the work and bring it to a certain level of predictability for enjoyment. Um, and like once you do it, it's so rewarding. Like, um, there's so many interesting ways of expression, in modern music, and yeah, like once I made myself listen to like Bartok's Second Violin Concerto on repeat for a few weeks, because even though at first it's a pretty difficult like work as a listener, I knew that there was like something in it that I was like attracted to, and eventually it became like one of my favorite violin concertos after I had it on loop, um, because like the pieces like harmonies and like folk inspired elements and orchestration are now like so enjoyable because I put in that work. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would just say like repeated listening helps.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that's it.
Cool.
Um, Thank you so much for meeting me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll see each other soon.
Yeah, yeah.